Won't you please join me? Join me for a walk down nostalgia lane. Hello there, my name is Alyssa, and welcome to this month's installment of Nostalgia Lane, a monthly series of videos in which I revisit an old film from my childhood, or in some cases my teenagehood, and it's usually a film that I haven't seen in a very long time, and I am curious to see how I feel about the film now. This month's film will be Superman 2 from 1982, and just to clarify, I will be reviewing the original theatrical release, not the Donner cut, because the point of these videos is for me to revisit something from my childhood. I didn't see the Donner cut in my childhood, so it would be kind of pointless for me to review that version of the film. I actually have never seen the Donner cut. I kind of now want to go and find it since I just rewatched the original version. So anyway, if you're familiar with this series, you know how it goes. I'll start with why I chose the film, then I'll go into what I thought of it as a kid, and then I will talk about what I think of it now, and then I will give my rating out of 10 as I see it right now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, Superman 2. Why did I choose Superman 2? Well, I think because of the kind of MCU craze this year, there's a ton of new MCU content, and that just kind of got me thinking about superhero films in general. Earlier this year, I watched or rewatched all of the Spider-Man films, in some cases watched for the first time, and I hadn't revisited the Superman films in a very long time, so I thought it might be fun to go and revisit my favorite one of all time, the one that really stood out to me as a little kid, and that was Superman 2. In doing so, though, I also rewatched Superman 1, or Superman the movie, because you can't watch Superman 2 without watching Superman 1 first. You won't understand what's going on. So I did watch both of them, and I will briefly touch on Superman the movie once I get to the part where I talk about how I feel about the films now, but primarily this review will focus on Superman 2. So I remember pretty clearly seeing the trailer for this film for the first time when I was very young, and it was presented like 3 villains with the same powers as Superman, and they showed the scene of them at the end like flying around the city, and it was very ominous, and I was like, wow, I gotta see that movie. I can't wait for that movie. Mom, we gotta go see that movie. Oh! And then once I did go see the movie, I fucking loved it so much. It was like my favorite movie ever at the time, probably even more so than E.T., I dare say, which came out around the same time. I freaking loved this movie so much. And I found the ending very, very satisfying because it was so ominous for Superman. It did look like that he didn't have much of a chance. I mean, here's these 3 dudes with the same power that he has, and the battle with them in the city, it looks like impossible odds for Superman, because not only does he have to defeat 3 of them, but also he's got to somehow rescue the people, because they picked up on the fact that he cares about these people, so they keep trying to harm people, and so it just seems really impossible. But then he's able to lure them over to the Fortress of Solitude, and execute a brilliant plan, which I found very satisfying at the time, where he tricks Lex Luthor into helping him out so that he goes into that little chamber that takes your powers away, except he had previously, we assume off screen, reversed it so that it affects the people on the outside of the chamber, and while he's safe on the inside of the chamber. And I absolutely loved the scene where he comes out and he bows to General Zod, because at the time as a little kid I was like, no, Superman, don't bow to him. And he bows and he goes and cracks his hand. I was like, yes. And then that big guy trying to fly and just falling on his face. And then it was super satisfying for me for Lois Lane to punch out that chick, because that lady had been harassing Lois Lane the whole movie. So it was so satisfying when she just punched her out. And I just loved that ending so much. And it was very easily my favorite superhero film for a very long time after that. And the one thing I didn't love as a kid was the whole thing about him losing his powers and getting his powers back, but it didn't ruin the film for me in any way. It didn't even detract from the film. It was just a thing that was like, well, that's not my favorite thing, but it was still a 10. If I was giving ratings back then, which I wasn't, I would have given it a 10. It was still one of the greatest movies of all time, even though that aspect of it wasn't my favorite. I was able to overlook it pretty easily, and overall I just saw this film as an amazing, great film. Now let's see what I think of it now upon my rewatch. So before I get specifically into my rewatch of Superman 2, I do want to touch on my rewatch of Superman the movie, and it just really re-emphasizes for me just how vastly superior Superman 2 is to Superman 1. I always thought that as a kid, and watching them back to back now, it just really drives that home. Superman, the movie, Superman 1, has no plot whatsoever. So the first hour or so is the Superman origin story, and then it's followed by a montage of Superman flying around saving people and saving kittens from trees and thwarting the most cartoonish of villains imaginable. Like, there were these dudes with ski masks and they were counting this pile of money, like counting their money. It was very ridiculous. And then this scene with Superman flying around with Lois Lane as she recites really horrible poetry in her head. And then an extraordinarily underwhelming confrontation between Superman and Lex Luthor. In fact, I had forgotten just how lame that confrontation actually is. And then Superman saves the day at the end. Blah, blah, blah. End of movie. Superman 2, by contrast, does have a plot. And as I said from how I felt about it when I was a kid, it really does feel ominous for Superman. The tension really does hold up. And the ending fight scene and the ending scene at the Fortress of Solitude are still great for me. I still really highly enjoyed them. The part that I didn't like when I was a kid, I would say bothers me a lot more. I said that when I was a kid, it didn't detract from the film. I think it kind of much does detract from the film now. It really does bother me. But I'll get to that in a minute. Let me start with the positive. So it's really interesting seeing the showdown in the city between Superman and the three villains. Now, it's actually kind of refreshing to see a climactic battle that isn't like just CGI vomiting on the screen, like all the CGI everywhere. Just, it's a very old-fashioned, simplistic superhero battle, and it was refreshing. And yeah, it has like really bad effects with the villains, shooting out, the heat ray vision out of their eyes. It looks like it was edited by a high school freshman on their laptop. Actually, a high school freshman on their laptop today could do a lot better. But even so, it was kind of refreshing to just see just a straightforward mano a mano, hero fighting villains without all the CGI. And it was really kind of interesting that Superman not only had to fight these three, but did have to save these people. It was kind of a brilliant strategy on General Zod's part. It's like, he cares about these people. Well, what if I just kind of hurt them a little bit? And made it really difficult for Superman to overcome. So then he flies off, and then everyone's like, Superman, where are you going? And then he lures them to the Fortress of Solitude. Oh, and by the way, before we talk about the Fortress of Solitude, there's a scene there in the city where the villains are using their super blowing powers, going and blowing. It goes on for a good 5 minutes or so. They're blowing all these people around, and Superman is stuck under a bus or whatever. There were some really funny scenes in that. There was this woman and this man, and her wig blows off, and the man's toupee blows off, and the woman's like, my hair! And the man's like, your hair? What about my hair? And they're blowing around. It's like, this is so silly. And then there's a dude in the phone booth, not the full-on booth, but like the little phone, thing, whatever. And he's on the phone, and the phone blows over, and he's laying on the ground on the phone, and he's still talking. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. And then the phone keeps getting blown down the street, and he's laying there. Well, on the phone, he starts laughing maniacally, like, like, who is the director that said, okay, you, extra, I want you to lay on the ground, talking on the phone, and then start laughing maniacally. Like, it just looked really silly. But it was great. I had a lot of fun. It was great. Now, as for the Fortress of Solitude scene, it holds. I mean, obviously, I know what's going to happen, but it really was kind of a brilliant strategy by Superman, and it still felt very, very satisfying. I will say, though, the scene where Lois Lane punches out that woman, she goes, you're a real pain in the neck. And she was making fun of Clark in the previous film for using the word swell. You don't get to make fun of somebody for using the word swell and then go, you're a pain in the neck to the person who's been harassing you all movie. You got to come up with something better. I mean, I understand it's a PG movie. They can't have cussing or whatever, but still, it played as a bit cheesy. But overall, I still actually really enjoyed that climax and the satisfying ending at the end, and that does make up for a little bit of the things that I really were bothered by the film. Let me talk about that now. Let me talk about my critiques a little bit. Okay, so the whole thing about him losing his powers actually really bothered me a lot in my rewatch, and even more so, more broadly speaking, the whole idea that Superman is just so goddamn oblivious of things. So even in the beginning of the movie, there's this terrorist attack in Paris, and Clark Kent kind of just meanders into the Daily Planet office, and Perry White's like, what, you didn't hear about the terrorist attack in Paris? And Clark Kent's like, no, not particularly. And Lois Lane has already booked a flight. She's already there in Paris covering the story, and Clark Kent doesn't know anything about it. Why not? How is Superman so fucking oblivious? I didn't get that. Was he just busy flying around for the opening credits sequence, going dun 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 dun, starring Christopher Reeves? Like he was busy doing that, so he was oblivious to the fact there's a fucking terrorist attack in Paris. I mean, that's a big deal. How does he not know that? So I didn't get it. And this continues in the film where there's all these scenes of General Zod and his two companions going around conquering towns and then conquering the White House and making the president kneel before them. Interspliced with scenes of Superman getting Lois Lane flowers and buying her groceries and taking her on romantic getaways. How is he oblivious to the world being conquered by 3 Kryptonians? Like, how is he so goddamn oblivious? This is driving me crazy. Like, he's handing Lois Lane flowers. They're going, doo, 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 doo. I'm like, Superman, what the hell are you doing? Like, I don't understand how he's so oblivious. And then we get into the whole thing about him losing his powers. That is kind of ridiculous. So when he goes to get his powers taken away, the projection of his mother is telling him, okay, be warned, this is permanent. You'll never, ever, ever get your powers back ever again. This has changed your life forever. You're going to be like a regular mortal human being forever and ever and ever. It's completely permanent. It'll never change. So with all of that build up, you would think it would be really hard for Superman to get his powers back. But actually it was super easy, barely an inconvenience. And yes, I am quoting the pitch meeting there. I mean, seriously though, it was super easy. Like, all he does is just kind of walk on back to the Fortress of Solitude, walk right on back up to that machine, and get his powers back pretty much immediately. Like, it wasn't even a little bit hard. So why all the buildup about how permanent it is? Also, in my head, I had remembered the him having, him not having his powers lasting for like a good chunk of the movie, like half the movie. But he's without his powers for 15 minutes. He basically just goes to that one diner and gets his ass kicked and then sees the newscast with General Zod and it's like, okay, I gotta go get my powers back now, and just kind of hitchhikes over to the Fortress of Solitude. Also, the Fortress of Solitude was very easy to get to. Like, it seems like it was so easy to get to that it seems like someone else would have discovered it by now, because apparently you can just walk to it pretty easily. They do show him like trying to hitchhike with a truck and failing to hitchhike, and then the next time you see him, he's just kind of walking up to the Fortress of Solitude. It's like, what? so that whole thing is just very sloppy. It's just very poorly done. So now I'm curious to see if the Donner cut does that differently, so I do kind of want to watch it. However, that is made up for by the ending. The final confrontation with him and the three does make up for that for me. And then, of course, the satisfying scene in the Fortress of Solitude. So the movie is able to recover, but I am definitely bothered by all of that stuff a lot more upon my rewatch than I was as a kid. All right, so let me go ahead and give my rating out of 10 for the film as I see it today. So it definitely would have been a 10 when I was a kid, but after my rewatch, I am now going to give this film an 8. So it's still by far the best Superman movie of any Superman franchise, and definitely the best of the Christopher Reeves films. I'm not even going to bother rewatching Superman 3 and 4 because those were terrible. So it's definitely the best Superman movie ever, and it is still one of the best superhero movies of all time. It's kind of unfair to compare it to the complexities of the MCU because I feel like that's a different era of superhero films. Like, superhero films have evolved and advanced from that time, but just looking at it from the time period that it was made, it still stands as one of the best superhero movies ever, although I have to knock it down from a 10 to an 8 because of those things that really bugged the shit out of me in my rewatch, which ultimately did not kill the film because they do recover at the end. But I do have to give it an 8 rather than a 10 for those reasons. Okay, and that does it for this month's edition of Nostalgia Lane. Join me in January 2022. The first Nostalgia Lane for 2022 will feature the film The Goonies. So this is a little bit of a different kind of Nostalgia Lane because unlike all the other ones that I've covered, it's not something that I watched a million times or thought of as one of my favorites of all time at any point. I really enjoyed the film quite a lot as a kid. I saw it maybe 2 or 3 times, but it's not one that I carried with me into adulthood, and it feels to me like everyone else in my generation or even slightly younger than me did carry that forward into their adulthood. Like, it's super trendy to really love the Goonies for people in my generation, and I just never held on to it for whatever reason. I did like it, but it just wasn't always one of my favorites. So I'm very curious now to just go and watch it. I noticed it was on HBO Max. I'm like, I should watch that one. It would be very interesting just kind of see. So that will be next month. For the exact date of that, check out my January calendar, which should be posted to my channel pretty soon. So also subscribe if you have not already, and hit the like button and all of that stuff. And I will see you very soon. Goodbye, everybody.